The night shift at Crescent Tower had been posted for 19 days. 27 workers had seen the listing. Not one had accepted. Marcus Webb stood in the temp agency's cramped waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects, staring at the printout while his daughter's voice from that morning echoed in his skull. "Daddy, why can't I have a birthday party like the other kids?" He didn't have an answer she would understand. 7 years old, and Emma had already learned to phrase her wants as questions to make them sound optional. Negotiable, easily dismissed. She had learned this from watching him navigate their life, from seeing him choose between electricity and groceries, from overhearing phone calls with debt collectors who called at dinner time because they knew people would be home and desperate to make them stop. The shift paid $22 an hour, time and a half for overnight. Marcus did the math automatically, a reflex honed by 3 years of calculating whether he could afford milk and bread in the same week. 8 hours, 5 nights before taxes. Enough to cover rent with something left over. Enough to buy pizza and a small cake. Enough to stop seeing that careful blankness in Emma's eyes when her friends talked about their parties. Barbara Walsh sat behind the desk, 50 years worn into her face like water erosion on stone, watching him with the expression of someone who had learned not to invest hope in temporary workers. Her office smelled of burnt coffee and the particular desperation of people who needed work immediately and couldn't afford to be choosy. "Mr. Webb, I need to be honest with you. This position has been difficult to fill." The understatement hung between them. Barbara's fingers drummed against the desk, a nervous tell that suggested there was more she wasn't saying. Marcus had learned to read these tells during 12 years as a construction supervisor, back when he had a salary and benefits and the luxury of turning down jobs that felt wrong. How many people have quit? Her drumming stopped. 3 in the last month, all after their first shift. They wouldn't say why, just that it wasn't worth the pay. Marcus thought about the $43 in his wallet. He thought about Emma's birthday in 11 days. He thought about the eviction notice taped to their door last month, the one he had removed before Emma could see it, the one that said he had until October 1st to catch up or find somewhere else to live. Tomorrow was October 1st. Is it dangerous? Barbara's hesitation lasted 2 seconds too long. No reports of violence. No safety violations on record. The building is secure. What she didn't say weighted the air more than her words. Marcus had interrogated enough subcontractors to recognize evasion, but he also recognized necessity. And necessity had a way of making men accept things they would have walked away from in better times. "I'll take it." Relief in something that might have been guilt flickered across Barbara's face. She slid the paperwork across the desk. "Start tonight, 11 p.m. Report to the main security desk. You'll get instructions there." Marcus signed without reading the fine print. Men who could afford lawyers read fine print. Men with $43 and an eviction notice signed where they were told and hoped for the best. The apartment building where Marcus and Emma lived had been middle-class housing 50 years ago, back when the neighborhood had different demographics and different dreams. Now it was a 3-story brick structure with water stains blooming across the facade like bruises, windows covered in security bars that did nothing to make anyone feel secure, and a front door lock that had been broken for 6 months. Rosa O'Brien was making breakfast when Marcus returned at 7:30 that morning. Her apartment door open in the way of people who had given up on privacy because community mattered more. The smell of eggs and toast drifted into the hallway, a small mercy that made the building feel less like a warehouse for the economically abandoned. She was 68, Irish by descent and Chicago by birth, with hands that had worked as a nurse for 40 years before arthritis forced retirement. Her husband had died 3 years ago, same month as Sarah. Grief had made them neighbors into something more. "Marcus, love, you look exhausted. New job keeping you up, night shift. Starts tonight." Rose's expression shifted, the kind of shift that happened in people who had seen enough of life to know when someone was making a choice out of desperation rather than opportunity. Her kitchen was smaller than his, but warmer somehow, filled with photographs of grandchildren who lived 2 states away and visited twice a year if she was lucky. Where Crescent Tower, downtown. That's the big glass one, yeah. Fancy? Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to explain that fancy buildings still needed someone to walk their empty halls at 3 in the morning, and that job paid just enough to keep people like him from slipping all the way under. Rosa understood anyway. She had a gift for understanding things people didn't say. I'll watch Emma tonight. No charge, don't even start. Rosa, I can't keep. Yes, you can. Sarah was my friend. Emma is practically my granddaughter. You insult me when you talk about money. The argument was ritual by now, comfortable in its predictability. Marcus would offer $15. Rosa would refuse. Marcus would leave it on her counter when she wasn't looking. Rosa would slip it back into Emma's backpack with a note telling him to buy the child something nice. They had been doing this dance for 3 years, 2 broken people holding each other up in the small ways that mattered more than grand gestures. Emma was still asleep when Marcus returned to their apartment, curled on her side in the twin bed they had bought used from a thrift store, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. She claimed she was too old for stuffed animals now, but she couldn't sleep without it. Marcus suspected she would be sleeping with that rabbit when she went to college, if he could ever afford to send her to college. If the scholarship gods smiled and the financial aid office took pity, and 1,000 other ifs that kept him awake at night. The apartment was 600 square feet, split into a main room that served as living room and kitchen. 1 bedroom and a bathroom with water pressure that gave up entirely on cold mornings. The refrigerator hummed with a sound that suggested it was working harder than it should to keep things cold. Inside eggs, half a gallon of milk, pasta sauce, a block of cheese he was rationing to last the week. The freezer held frozen vegetables and chicken breasts he bought in bulk when they went on sale. Marcus made coffee with grounds he had been reusing for 3 days, adding an extra scoop to compensate for the weakness. The taste was terrible, but the caffeine was real. He sat at their small table, the one Sarah had found at a garage sale, and refinished herself back when they could afford hobbies, and opened his wallet. $43 in cash. His banking app showed $267 in checking. Rent was $950 due today. The math didn't work. It never worked. Marcus had gotten good at making it work anyway, through a combination of negotiation, delayed payments, and the kind of creative financing that would have impressed an accountant if it wasn't born from desperation. He would call the landlord this afternoon, explain he could pay $500 now, and the rest in 2 weeks, promise it wouldn't happen again. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma's school, automated reminder that picture day was next week and payments were due in advance. $25 for the basic package. Marcus deleted the message. Emma woke at 8, padding into the main room in pajamas printed with cartoon characters she was getting too old for but wouldn't admit to outgrowing. Her hair was dark like Sarah's, hanging in tangles that Marcus had never quite mastered braiding. She had his eyes, though, brown and serious, the kind of serious that 7-year-olds shouldn't have to be. Morning, sweetheart. Emma climbed into his lap without asking, still small enough to fit comfortably. Though he could feel how she was growing, lengthening, becoming something other than the toddler he had carried through hospital corridors 3 years ago. She smelled like sleep and the strawberry shampoo Rosa had bought her because Marcus kept forgetting. Did you get the job I did? Start tonight. Emma processed this information with the careful consideration of a child who had learned that adult jobs were fragile things that appeared and disappeared without warning. Is it a good job? It pays okay, and it's steady work. The lie sat between them, as transparent as it was necessary. Emma was 7, not stupid. She knew steady work didn't start at 11 p.m. and end at 7 a.m. But she also knew that asking for truth meant forcing him to give it, and truth would make them both feel worse. Can I still have my birthday party? The question came out carefully neutral, as if she was asking about the weather, as if the answer didn't matter. Marcus felt something crack in his chest, small and sharp like a stress fracture in concrete that would spread if left unattended. Yes, you can have your party. Emma's face didn't change, but her grip on his shirt tightened just slightly. Really, really. We'll get pizza. And a cake. You can invite 3 friends. The number was calculated. 4 kids meant 2 pizzas and 1 cake, manageable within the budget left after rent. Emma's smile was worth every dollar he didn't have. Can we get the one with extra cheese? Anything you want, baby? She hugged him, then fierce and quick, before sliding off his lap to get ready for school. Marcus sat at the table and added up costs he couldn't afford, and tried not to think about how many shifts at Crescent Tower it would take to catch up. The day passed in the mechanical rhythm of poverty. Marcus walked Emma to school 5 blocks through a neighborhood where storefront churches outnumbered grocery stores and everyone knew everyone else's business because privacy was a luxury of spacing and walls. He returned to the apartment and forced himself to sleep, the kind of fractured rest that came from trying to sleep when your body insisted it should be awake. He woke at 3, made lunch from leftovers, picked Emma up from school. They went to the library because it was free and air-conditioned and filled with books Emma could borrow without owing anything. She settled into her favorite corner with a book about astronomy, something about black holes and event horizons that Marcus pretended to understand when she tried to explain it. He watched her read, absorbed and content, and thought about Sarah. His wife had died on a Tuesday in March 3 years and 6 months ago. Ovarian cancer stage 4 by the time they found it, metastasized beyond hope of recovery. The oncologist had explained in careful terms that treatment would extend her life, but not save it, that they needed to think about quality versus quantity. Sarah had chosen 18 months of treatment over 6 months of comfort. Chosen it because Emma was 4 and wouldn't remember a mother who died when she was too young to form permanent memories. The treatment cost everything they had and more. Insurance covered 70%, which meant 30% of enormous numbers still added up to life-destroying debt. Marcus had sold their car, sold their furniture, sold everything that could be converted to cash, then took out credit cards he couldn't afford to pay off, then medical payment plans that stretched into decades. Sarah died in their bedroom with Marcus holding her hand and Emma asleep on the couch. Her last words had been about integrity, about teaching Emma that doing right mattered more than doing well. That character was what you did when no one was watching, that a person who could look themselves in the mirror was richer than someone who couldn't, no matter how much money the latter had in their bank account. Marcus had promised. He had promised through tears and grief and the absolute certainty that he was losing the only person who had ever believed he was worth something. 3 years later, he was keeping that promise with $43 in his wallet and a daughter who asked permission to want things. They ate dinner at 5:30, pasta with sauce Marcus stretched with extra tomato paste and spices that almost masked the thinness. Emma chatted about school, about the science project she wanted to do on lunar phases, about how her friend Kayla had invited her to a birthday party at a trampoline park that cost $30 for admission. Marcus made encouraging sounds and calculated whether he could afford $30 in 2 weeks. Rosa came at 10:30 to walk Emma next door. The girl had her backpack with homework and her rabbit and the book about black holes. She hugged Marcus with the intensity of someone who had learned that goodbyes sometimes became permanent, who knew that parents who left for work didn't always come back. "Be safe, Daddy. Always am, sweetheart. Be good for Mrs. O'Brien." Rosa's hand on his shoulder was brief but grounding. "You do what you need to do, Marcus. We'll be fine here." He watched them disappear into Rosa's apartment before returning to his own. The building was quieter at night, the kind of quiet that amplified small sounds into something larger. Marcus changed into the closest thing he had to professional clothes, black pants, and a button-down shirt that had seen better years, and checked his phone. A voicemail from Emma left 10 minutes ago while he was watching her walk next door. "Hi, Daddy. Mrs. O'Brien said I could stay up until you texted goodnight, but I got too sleepy. I hope your new job is okay. I know you're working really hard for us. I love you. See you in the morning." Marcus saved the message. He had 17 saved voicemails from Emma. Small reassurances he could listen to when the weight of everything became too much. He added this one to the collection and forced himself not to listen to it immediately, not to waste the comfort when he would need it more later. The bus downtown took 40 minutes, cutting through neighborhoods that grew progressively wealthier as they approached the lake. Crescent Tower rose against the night sky like a monument to ambition, 68 stories of glass and steel reflecting the scattered lights of Chicago. Marcus had worked construction on buildings like this back when his hands built things instead of just checking locks and signing logs. He knew how much concrete went into foundations this deep, how many tons of steel formed the skeleton, how many man-hours of labor it took to make something this massive look effortless. The lobby was everything civilian spaces in rich buildings always were: polished marble that showed every footprint, careful lighting that made expensive things look even more expensive, and the kind of silence that came from good insulation and the absence of anyone who couldn't afford to be there. The security desk sat in the center like an island, cheap particle board furniture that clashed with everything around it. A reminder that the people who worked here were service class and didn't merit the same aesthetic consideration. 3 coffee cups sat on the desk, different sizes and different levels of fullness, as if 3 different people had started their shift and abandoned their drinks at different times. Marcus picked one up. Stone cold, at least 6 hours old. The other 2 were the same, a timeline of failure written in decreasing caffeine. The logbook lay open to September, entries growing sparser as the month progressed. The first week showed detailed notes, times and locations, and observations written in neat handwriting. The second week was less detailed, shorter entries, a different hand. The third week had 2 entries total, scrawled quickly, barely legible. The fourth week was blank until 3 days ago, when someone had written simply "nothing to report" and signed initials Marcus couldn't make out. 3 different people. 3 different levels of giving up. A key card sat in the desk drawer along with a radio that crackled with static when Marcus turned it on, and a checklist printed on paper that had been photocopied so many times the text was starting to blur. 47 checkpoint locations across the lower 40 floors, 12 rounds per shift. Marcus did the math. 40 floors, 12 rounds, 8 hours, 38 minutes per round if he moved quickly and didn't waste time. The radio spat static at him when he tried to check in. No voice on the other end, just white noise and the occasional burst of interference. Marcus clipped it to his belt anyway, along with the flashlight he found in another drawer, battery indicator showing maybe half charge. The elevator took him to the 3rd floor to start his first round. The hallways stretched in both directions, identical in their corporate blandness, fluorescent lights humming at a frequency that made his teeth ache. Emergency exit signs glowed green at regular intervals. Their batteries maintained by building codes that demanded reliability in crisis. The first anomaly appeared on the 3rd floor 7 minutes into his shift. Emergency lighting in the east corridor, 12 bulbs mounted along the ceiling designed to activate if power failed and guide people to safety. 7 of the 12 were dark. Not burned out, Marcus could see that when he examined them more closely, but removed. Someone had unscrewed the bulbs and left the sockets empty. He pulled out the notebook he had brought from home, a spiral-bound thing Emma used for school, and wrote down the location and problem. 7 emergency lights, east corridor, floor 3, bulbs missing. The penmanship was careful, precise, the habit of a man who had once written daily reports to clients who paid by the detail. The pattern repeated on other floors. 15 had a fire door that stuck when he tried to open it. Hinges rusted from moisture and neglect. 28 had HVAC vents making a grinding sound that suggested bearings wearing down metal on metal. The kind of sound that meant something would fail soon and fail catastrophically. Marcus documented everything, his notebook filling with observations no one had bothered to make or record. At midnight, his phone buzzed, a text from Rosa with a photo attached. Emma asleep on her couch, math homework spread across the coffee table, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Beneath the photo was Emma's voicemail transcribed to text, Rosa's way of making sure he had it in writing. Marcus sat in a stairwell on floor 40 and listened to the voicemail again. His daughter's voice, sleepy and small and full of faith he wasn't sure he deserved. I know you're working really hard for us. The building felt different after that, less empty. He carried her voice with him like armor against the silence, checking locks and testing doors and doing work no one else had wanted because someone had to. And he had stopped waiting for easy a long time ago. The upper floors were different from the lobby. Less finished, more functional, filled with mechanical rooms and server closets and the infrastructure that kept buildings like this running. Marcus moved through them methodically, noting temperatures on cooling units, checking warning lights on electrical panels. The kind of preventive observation that separated competent workers from those just collecting paychecks. Dust had accumulated in corners where cleaning crews didn't reach. Certain doors stuck slightly, not from rust, but from disuse, as if no one had opened them in weeks. The silence carried weight here. The particular heaviness of neglect of systems left unexamined because they had worked yesterday and would probably work tomorrow, and no one wanted to look too closely at the space between probably and certainly. At 2 in the morning, Marcus had covered 40 floors and found nothing that couldn't be explained by ordinary maintenance failures. At 3, the isolation was starting to press against his ears, making small sounds feel significant. The building breathed around him, HVAC systems cycling on and off, elevators humming between floors, the structural creaks of 68 stories settling against their foundation. At 3:47, Marcus found the first sign of something worse than neglect. Floor 54, mechanical room housing part of the fire suppression system. The door was unmarked except for a number easy to walk past if you weren't checking every door, easy to ignore if you were doing rounds the way the previous guards apparently had. Just walking hallways and signing logs. Marcus opened it because thoroughness was the only thing standing between him and the certainty that he was failing his daughter. The room was small, crowded with pipes and valves and the kind of infrastructure civilians never thought about until it didn't work. A pressure gauge mounted on the main waterline needle resting at 42 psi, numbers marked in red below 60. Marcus knew enough about fire suppression to recognize the danger. The standard on the wall, printed on yellowed paper behind cracked plastic, specified minimum operating pressure of 75 psi. He checked the backup gauge, thinking the first must be broken. 44 psi. A 2-point difference that confirmed this wasn't instrument error, this was real. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, the kind of quickening that happened when you realized something was very wrong and you were the only person who knew. If a fire broke out anywhere in the upper 20 floors right now, the sprinklers would activate but barely function, delivering 60% of the water they needed, turning a controllable emergency into a catastrophe. The maintenance log hung on the wall clipboard with entries going back 3 months. Every week, the same notation: J. Morrison pressure check, 75 psi normal. 11 consecutive weeks, same handwriting, same blue pen, same numbers. Marcus had supervised enough workers to recognize forged documentation. No one's handwriting was identical 11 times. This was someone copying their own signature, filling in blanks, certifying normalcy that didn't exist. He opened the file cabinet unlocked because no one imagined a night security guard would care enough to look. 4 reports from last year, engineers noting pressure drops, recommending investigation. Each report stamped "resolved" in red ink. But no follow-up documentation, no work orders. No evidence anyone had actually resolved anything. The email printout was in the back of the bottom drawer, buried under manuals no one had read in years. Dated March 15th, 6 months ago. From Gerald.Vance@hartfieldprop.com to Tom Sullivan @hartfieldprop.com. Subject line: Q1 cost reduction. Body text brief and damning. Do not escalate fire system issues to executive level. Cost reduction targets are mandatory. Handle maintenance internally with minimum spend. Marcus photographed the email with his phone hand steady despite the anger building in his chest. This wasn't negligence. This was conscious choice, someone deciding that saving money mattered more than keeping people safe. Someone gambling that fires were rare enough that they could roll the dice and probably get away with it. He thought about the 4,200 people who worked in this building during business hours according to the orientation packet Barbara had given him. Secretaries and executives and maintenance workers and cafeteria staff. People with families waiting for them to come home. People who trusted that the fire safety systems protecting them actually worked. None of them knew the sprinklers above their desks were operating at 56% capacity. Marcus pulled out his radio and called down to building management. Static answered him, empty and indifferent. He tried the emergency maintenance line listed on the wall beneath a plastic cover that had yellowed with age. The number rang 12 times before connecting to a voicemail box that sounded full. He found the after-hours contact number for the building manager in the security binder, a 3-ring notebook with pages falling out. Diane Fletcher, building operations manager. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, groggy and irritated in the way of people woken from deep sleep. This is Marcus Webb, overnight security at Crescent Tower. I found a serious problem with the fire suppression system on the upper floors. The pressure is dangerously low. This needs immediate attention. A pause, rustling sound, someone sitting up in bed and reaching for alertness. The fire system was inspected last month. It's fine. I'm looking at the gauges right now. They're showing 42 psi. Standard requires 75 minimum. If there's a fire, the woman's voice hardened, shedding sleep for something more controlled, more defensive. Look, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but our systems are inspected quarterly by certified technicians. If there was a problem, they would have caught it. Marcus felt his grip tighten on the phone, knuckles going white. The technicians are signing off on falsified reports. I found maintenance logs showing normal pressure for 11 weeks straight, but the actual gauges read 42 and 44 psi. Another pause, longer this time. When Diane spoke again, her voice had gone cold with what Marcus recognized as fear disguised as authority. The tone of someone whose job depended on problems not existing. You're new, aren't you? Let me give you some advice. The night shift is simple. Walk your rounds, sign the logs, go home in the morning. Don't create problems that aren't there. It makes everyone's job harder, including yours. The line went dead. Marcus stood alone in the mechanical room, surrounded by equipment worth millions of dollars, staring at a gauge that could mean the difference between life and death for thousands of people, and wondered what exactly he was supposed to do now. The building manager's words echoed as he continued his rounds. Don't create problems that aren't there. It was advice he had heard at half the jobs he'd worked over the past 3 years. Phrased different ways but carrying the same message. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Be grateful for the paycheck and don't ask questions that might make someone uncomfortable. It was good advice for survival, the kind of advice that kept you employed and fed and housed. It was terrible advice for conscience. Marcus thought about Emma asleep at Rose's, about her birthday party, about the $43 in his wallet that needed to become $500 by morning. He thought about what he would tell his daughter if she asked why he hadn't done anything, if someday there was a fire and people got hurt and the news showed pictures of the building he had walked through on the night when everything could have been prevented. He thought about the voicemail she had left, about working hard, about doing the right thing even when no one was watching. He thought about Sarah's last words. Character is what you do when no one's watching. A person who can look themselves in the mirror is richer than someone who can't, no matter how much money the latter has. He made a choice. The next 90 minutes were the most focused of Marcus's professional life. He moved through the upper floors with purpose that had nothing to do with his job description, driven by something that felt less like anger and more like clarity. He documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who knew this evidence needed to be bulletproof beyond dismissal or dispute. 47 photographs of pressure gauges from multiple angles, timestamps visible surrounding infrastructure included to verify location. 6 videos of maintenance logs with falsified entries, the camera steady as he paged through weeks of Jay Morrison's identical signatures, notes on every system he could find. Connected to the fire suppression network written in the clear block letters, his construction supervisors had demanded the kind of writing that couldn't be misread even if someone wanted to misread it. He accessed the building's service records through a terminal in the maintenance office. Using login credentials he found on a sticky note beside the keyboard because apparently no one had imagined a night security guard might care enough to look. What he found made his stomach drop further. The pressure problem wasn't isolated to floor 54. It affected everything above the 50th floor, including the executive suite. 22 floors of compromised fire protection. Thousands of people who came to work every morning trusting someone somewhere was paying attention. At 4:30, Marcus made a decision that would either save lives or end his career in building security permanently, possibly both. He located the manual override for the building's fire alert system and triggered a Level 2 notification, the kind that didn't activate sprinklers or trigger evacuation, but created an official incident report that would be automatically forwarded to the Chicago Fire Marshal's office at the start of business. He logged the action in the security system under his own name and credentials, no ambiguity about who had made the call. He wrote a detailed summary of his findings, 9 pages by hand, because he wanted the record to be physical, harder to delete or dismiss, and emailed it to every address he could find in the building's emergency contact database. The fire marshal, OSHA, the building department, the CEO, Elena Hartfield, whose name appeared on the directory as owner and primary executive. 4 facilities managers whose emails were listed in the system. He was thorough. He was careful. He left no room for anyone to claim they hadn't been informed, no space for this to be buried under administrative procedure or interdepartmental buck passing. Every action documented, every step justified by building codes and safety regulations. And the simple fact that people deserved to work in buildings that wouldn't kill them if something went wrong. Then he sat down in the security office, pulled out his phone, and listened to Emma's voicemail 3 more times while waiting for the sun to come up. Her voice was small and sleepy and full of trust. He hoped he wasn't about to betray by losing this job before he'd worked a full shift. But Emma had also said she was proud of him, proud that he did what was right even when it was scary. Marcus couldn't think of anything scarier or more right than this. His shift ended at 7. Marcus signed out in the logbook, writing his observations in the space provided, turning what should have been a single line into half a page of documented concerns. Critical fire suppression system failure noted and reported per emergency protocols. See attached incident report. Contact Fire Marshal's office for details. M. Webb Night Security 09/30/2024 0700 hours. He gathered his jacket and walked through the employee entrance into the pale gray light of a Chicago dawn. No one stopped him. No one asked questions. The morning shift security guard, Kyle Brennan, was just arriving, 28 years old, with the clean-cut look of someone who had probably been a cop before discovering private security paid better for less risk. They passed each other in the doorway, Kyle already focused on checking his phone. "You look like hell." Rough first night, Marcus paused in the doorway, morning light cutting across the lobby floor in geometric patterns. "Just doing the job." Kyle glanced at the logbook, at Marcus's half-page of notes, and something flickered in his expression that might have been respect or might have been concern that the new guy was already making problems. "Yeah, well, good luck with that." The train back to his neighborhood took an hour. Rush hour commuters packed into cars with the resigned exhaustion of people who did this 5 days a week and would keep doing it until retirement or death, whichever came first. Marcus stood near the door, too tired to fight for a seat, and felt exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. He had done something that might help people he would never meet, and he had done something that might cost him the only income keeping his family afloat. The two possibilities coexisted in his mind without resolution. Rosa was making breakfast when he let himself in, eggs and toast that smelled better than anything Marcus could have made for himself. Emma was at the kitchen table in her pajamas, eating cereal and reading her astronomy book. She looked up when he entered, and her face broke into the kind of smile that made everything else feel manageable. Daddy, how was your job? Was the building really big, biggest I've ever worked in, sweetheart? Did you see any ghosts? Marcus laughed despite his exhaustion, despite the certainty that he had just destroyed any chance of keeping this job past today. No ghosts, just a lot of empty hallways and some machines that needed checking. He sat with Emma while she finished breakfast, listening to her talk about the book she was reading and the science project she was planning and how her friend Kayla had a hamster that could run really fast on a wheel. Marcus absorbed every word, every gesture, every small moment of ordinary life and felt something inside him settle into place. Whatever happened next, he had done what he could live with. That would have to be enough. Rosa walked Emma to school while Marcus showered and changed into clothes that didn't smell like the nervous sweat of a man committing career suicide for the sake of strangers. His phone sat on the bathroom counter silent, no calls from the temp agency or building management or anyone else. The silence felt ominous, the pause before consequences landed. He forced himself to sleep, the kind of sleep that came from pure exhaustion overriding anxiety. When he woke at 11:15, his phone had 2 missed calls, one from Barbara Walsh at the temp agency, one from a number he didn't recognize with a Chicago area code. No voicemails on either. Marcus called Barbara first, standing in his kitchen with coffee that tasted like defeat, preparing himself for the conversation he'd known was coming. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about last night." Her voice was careful, the tone of someone delivering bad news they wished they didn't have to deliver. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about Emma's birthday party, about the pizza and cake he'd promised, about the way his daughter had smiled when he said, "Yes, I know. They want to terminate me." Barbara's silence confirmed it before she spoke. "The client called this morning. They said you filed false reports about the fire system. They said you created an emergency situation that disrupted building operations. They want you off the assignment immediately." The accusations landed like physical blows made worse by their predictability. Marcus had known this was possible, had accepted it as the price of doing what needed doing, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. The reports aren't false. The fire suppression system is running at 56% capacity. 22 floors with inadequate water pressure. If there's a fire, I believe you, Marcus. For what it's worth, I believe you. But the client doesn't want you back, and I can't force them to take you. I'm sorry. Marcus opened his eyes and stared at his empty refrigerator, at the bills stacked on the counter, at the calendar with Emma's birthday circled in red marker. When will I get paid for last night? 8 hours at $22 per hour minus taxes. Should be a check in about a week, maybe 10 days. $176 before taxes. Maybe $130 after. Added to his current balance that gave him just under $500. Still short on rent. Still broke. Still failing. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity, Barbara. Marcus, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. That probably doesn't help, but you did. The call ended. Marcus set his phone on the counter and stared at it for a full minute, processing the confirmation that he had traded job security for moral clarity and would now have to explain to his 7-year-old daughter why doing the right thing meant they might be homeless by the end of the month. His phone rang again, the unknown Chicago number. Marcus almost didn't answer, expecting collections or telemarketers or some other automated system designed to make poor people feel worse about being poor. But unemployment made him answer anyway, made him grab at anything that might be opportunity. Is this Marcus Webb? A woman's voice, professional, with the kind of polish that suggested expensive education and positions where people listened when you spoke. Marcus's exhaustion sharpened into wariness. Yes. Who's calling? Veronica Kane. I'm executive assistant to Elena Hartfield. Ms. Hartfield received your report about the fire suppression system. Marcus's pulse quickened, fight or flight instincts waking up despite his exhaustion. If this was a threat, if they were calling to intimidate him before he could talk to inspectors, Ms. Hartfield would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. Meet with me. Yes, she's read your documentation. She's reviewed the preliminary investigation her facilities team conducted this morning. She would like to discuss your findings. The words sounded reasonable, professional, utterly divorced from the reality of what Marcus knew happened to whistleblowers who made powerful people look bad. His construction experience had taught him that executives didn't want to discuss problems with the people who found them. They wanted those people gone. What kind of discussion, I'm not at liberty to say. But Ms. Hartfield was very clear that she wants to speak with you directly. Would 2 p.m. work? Her office floor 63. Marcus looked at the time, 11:30. He had 2.5 hours to decide whether walking into Elena Hartfield's office was opportunity or trap. Whether the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company wanted to thank him or threaten him or something in between that he couldn't predict. He thought about Emma, about Rosa, about the voicemail his daughter had left about being proud of him for doing what was right. 2 p.m. works. I'll be there. Word count 6001 words. 23 floors above the ground in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Elena Hartfield began her morning at 6:45. She arrived before most of her executive team, a habit developed in her 20s when she was still building the company from a small tech consultancy into the real estate empire it had become. At 33, she was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America, a fact journalists loved to mention and that she found increasingly irrelevant. Money was a tool, power was a responsibility. What mattered was what you built with both. Veronica Kane had laid out the morning briefings in their usual order. Financial reports, market analysis, project updates, personnel summaries. Elena worked through them with focused efficiency that had become her trademark, approving expenditures and flagging concerns and dictating responses to messages requiring personal attention. By 7:15, she had processed more information than most executives encountered in a full day. The incident report arrived in her inbox at 7:22, flagged urgent by the system's automatic filters. Elena read it once quickly, expecting routine fire drill notification or minor equipment issue that someone had escalated unnecessarily. Then she read it again more slowly and felt something cold settle in her chest. A Level 2 fire alert had been triggered at 4:37 that morning. The accompanying documentation included 47 photographs of pressure gauges showing critical failures, 6 videos of falsified maintenance logs, and a 9-page handwritten summary identifying systemic problems with the fire suppression system, covering the top 22 floors of her building. Her building, the one she had designed and financed and overseen construction on the crown jewel of Hartfield Properties. She had been in meetings yesterday on those floors. She had stood at windows on the 65th discussing quarterly projections while somewhere beneath her feet, systems designed to save her life were silently failing. The report had been filed by an overnight security guard named Marcus Webb. Elena had never heard the name before, had no memory of seeing it on any document that crossed her desk. She pulled up his personnel file and found almost nothing. A temporary employee hired through an outside agency assigned to cover shifts that full-time staff refused to work. No photo on file. No emergency contact except a neighbor's phone number and the name of a 7-year-old daughter listed in the dependent space. A temporary worker, a night shift security guard, the kind of employee who existed in the margins of her company, invisible and interchangeable, doing work that kept the building functioning but rarely merited attention from anyone in the executive suite. This was the person who had found what her entire facilities management team had missed or ignored or actively concealed. Elena called her head of operations. Gerald Vance answered on the second ring, already audibly nervous, which told her he had seen the report too and knew exactly how bad this looked. Ms. Hartfield, I just saw the report. I want to assure you that our fire systems are inspected quarterly by certified stop. The word came out quiet, but something in it made Gerald go silent immediately. Elena could hear his breathing on the other end, rapid and shallow, the sound of a man realizing his career was dissolving in real time. I'm looking at photographs of pressure gauges reading 42 psi when standard requires 75. I'm looking at maintenance logs with entries that appear to be falsified. I'm looking at documentation suggesting that the fire safety system in my building has been compromised for months while people signed off on reports telling me everything was fine. Explain. Ms. Hartfield. I'm sure there's an explanation. If you give me until end of day, I can. There is an explanation. Either your team failed to identify a critical safety issue, or they identified it and chose to cover it up. Neither option is acceptable. She paused, scrolling through the personnel file still open on her screen, this ghost employee who had somehow seen what her six-figure executives had not. This report was filed by a temporary overnight security guard. A man with no specialized training, no access to maintenance systems, no reason to be checking fire suppression equipment as part of his normal duties. He found a problem in 8 hours that your entire department missed for months or ignored for profit. Which is it? The silence stretched. When Gerald spoke again, his voice had shifted to the defensive tone of someone trying to reframe disaster as reasonable decision-making. We made some adjustments to maintenance schedules to meet Q1 cost reduction targets. The board approved efficiency measures, not falsified safety reports, not gambling with 4,000 lives because you wanted a bonus. Elena felt anger rising, the particular fury that came from being lied to by people she had trusted. I want a full investigation. Every maintenance record for the past year. Every technician who signed off on these inspections, every manager who reviewed and approved their work. On my desk by end of day. She hesitated, looking again at the sparse personnel file. And I want to know more about this security guard. Marcus Webb, where he lives, what his background is, why he decided to risk his job by reporting something that everyone else told him to ignore. Full background by noon. Ms. Hartfield, he's just a temp. I don't think he's the only person in this building who did his job correctly last night. That makes him more valuable than half my executive team. Get me the information. She ended the call and stood at her window watching morning light spread across the city below. Lake Michigan stretched to the horizon, calm and gray in the early hour. Somewhere down there in a neighborhood she had never visited, a man she had never met was going home to his daughter after a night spent doing what her own employees had failed to do. Elena Hartfield had built her reputation on seeing opportunities others missed, on recognizing value where others saw only risk. She had negotiated deals that seemed impossible, identified properties that others had dismissed, built a fortune on the foundation of paying attention when everyone else was looking away. But she had missed this. She had trusted systems and reports and quarterly certifications, had delegated oversight to managers who had delegated to technicians who had delegated to paperwork. Somewhere along that chain of trust, the actual truth had gotten lost. Her father had been a janitor. Joseph Hartfield, born in Edinburgh, emigrated to Chicago at 19 with $40 and a willingness to work jobs that natural-born Americans thought beneath them. He had cleaned office buildings for 40 years, mopping floors and emptying trash and maintaining spaces for people who never learned his name. He had done it with pride, had come home every night and told young Elena that honest work was its own reward, that the man who cleaned toilets with integrity was richer than the executive who lied to stakeholders. Joseph had died 5 years ago, emphysema from decades of breathing cleaning chemicals in poorly ventilated spaces. Elena had bought the building where he had worked longest and demolished it to build Crescent Tower. A monument to upward mobility, she had told herself. Proof that janitors' daughters could own the buildings their fathers cleaned. Now she wondered if her father would have been proud or horrified to know his daughter had created a gleaming tower where safety reports were falsified and workers who told the truth got fired. The background report arrived at 11:58, 2 minutes before her deadline. 15 pages on Marcus Webb, compiled from public records and databases that were technically legal to access, though ethically questionable to use on employees. Page 1, Marcus Webb, 41, honorable discharge from the Marine Corps after 4 years service. Page 3, wife Sarah Webb, deceased March 2022, ovarian cancer stage 4. 18 months from diagnosis to death. Page 5, medical debt totaling $87,000, payment plan of $200 monthly, never a late payment despite income that could barely support it. Page 8, daughter Emma Webb, 7 years old, enrolled in public school, GPA 3.9. Page 12, employment history showing steady decline from construction supervisor at $48,000 annually to series of temporary positions averaging $30,000. Page 14, current address in a neighborhood where median household income was $23,000. Monthly rent $950, which meant Marcus Webb was spending nearly 40% of his income on housing, which meant he was one emergency away from homelessness. Elena read the report twice, absorbing details that transformed Marcus Webb from an abstract name into something more concrete and more troubling. This was a man who had everything to lose and nothing to gain from making problems for his employer. A man whose wife had died, leaving him with debt that would take decades to clear and a child to raise alone. A man who worked overnight security because it paid slightly more than day shifts, and slightly more meant the difference between making rent and eviction. This was a man who had looked at a pressure gauge showing 42 psi and chosen to report it, knowing that choice would probably cost him his job. Who had documented everything with meticulous care and filed official reports and sent emails to regulatory agencies, burning every bridge to an income he desperately needed, because the alternative was staying silent while thousands of people worked in a building with compromised safety systems. Elena thought about her father, about his pride in honest work, about his belief that character mattered more than position. She had built this company and somehow forgotten that lesson. Yesterday, she had stood in this office and approved cost-cutting measures without asking where the cuts were happening. She had trusted reports without verifying them. She had let bureaucracy replace judgment. The Bureau Veritas report arrived at 1:15, 3 hours ahead of schedule, because Elena had paid double their standard rate for immediate response. The independent inspection confirmed everything Marcus Webb had documented and added new horrors. 22 floors with pressure between 38 and 46 psi. Main valve corroded to 40% capacity. 6 leak points in distribution pipes. Estimated failure rate of 70% if fire suppression activated. Cost to repair $1.2 million. Timeline: 6 weeks of work that would require either closing the upper floors or limiting repairs to overnight hours. Legal exposure if fire occurred before repairs, conservative estimate. $50 million in wrongful death lawsuits. Upper estimate $200 million plus criminal negligence charges. Elena did the mathematics that mattered. Marcus Webb's report had potentially saved her company from bankruptcy and her personally from prison. It had also exposed that her management structure was either incompetent or corrupt, that the systems she had trusted were theatrical rather than functional. She called an emergency board meeting for 2 p.m. knowing the response would be hostile, knowing Richard Hayes would demand explanations she didn't have. But Elena had not built this company by avoiding conflict or deflecting blame. The board meeting lasted 47 minutes. Richard Hayes, 67, board chair for 8 years, opened with the question Elena had been expecting. How did this happen? Elena didn't waste time on deflection. Our VP of Operations authorized cost-cutting measures that included deferring critical maintenance. Our facilities head implemented those measures by falsifying inspection reports. The failure is systemic and stops with me. The room was silent for 3 seconds. What's the damage? Financial, $1.2 million in immediate repairs. Reputational, depends on how we handle disclosure. Legal, minimal if we fix it now, catastrophic if we don't. Richard leaned forward, and this all came to light because of a security guard. Someone you hired 2 days ago. Someone we hired through a temp agency to cover shifts no one else would take. He worked one night and found problems our entire facilities department missed for months. Or created problems to justify his position. We've seen this before, Elena. Ambitious employees manufacturing crises so they can be heroes. Elena opened her laptop and turned it so the board could see. 47 photographs appeared in rapid succession, pressure gauges and maintenance logs, and equipment corrosion that couldn't be faked. Bureau Veritas confirmed every detail in his report. This isn't manufactured. This is real, and it's been real for at least 6 months. Richard sat back, his expression shifting from skepticism to calculation. What do you want to do? I want to approve the $1.2 million for repairs immediately. I want to hire an independent firm to audit all our safety systems across every property. I want to restructure facilities management entirely. And I want to offer Marcus Webb a position on my executive team. The last item detonated like a grenade. Multiple board members spoke at once, objections overlapping into noise that took Richard 30 seconds to quiet. You want to promote a temp worker to executive level because he filed one report. I want to hire the only person in this building who proved he can't be intimidated into silence when he sees something wrong. That's worth more than an MBA from Wharton. Elena, this is reactive. You're making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. The accusation stung because Richard knew it would, because he had watched Elena build this company by being cold and calculating. But he was wrong about the emotion. I built this company by seeing value others missed. Right now, Marcus Webb represents something I haven't seen in years. In corporate leadership, someone willing to do the right thing when it costs them personally. If we don't hire him, someone else will. And we'll spend the next decade reading case studies about the company that fired the whistleblower who tried to save them. The vote was 4-3 in her favor, narrow enough to be uncomfortable but sufficient to give her authorization. Richard abstained, which was his way of signaling disapproval without going on record against her. The meeting ended at 2:47. Elena had 13 minutes before Marcus Webb arrived, assuming he showed up at all, assuming he hadn't already decided that meeting with the CEO was a trap. Veronica knocked at 2:55. Ms. Hartfield, Mr. Webb is here. Send him in. Marcus Webb was taller than Elena expected, 6'1" or 6'2", with the lean build that came from physical labor rather than gym memberships. He wore clothing that had been chosen for professionalism on a budget, black slacks and a button-down shirt that had been ironed carefully but showed wear at the collar. His face showed exhaustion that went beyond one sleepless night, the kind of tired that accumulated over years of insufficient rest. But his eyes were alert, taking in the office, the view assessing with the intensity of someone who had learned that missing details could be dangerous. Mr. Webb, thank you for coming. He nodded but didn't speak, didn't move further into the room, maintaining position near the door like someone expecting to need an exit quickly. Elena recognized the wariness. She had seen it in her father, the particular caution of working-class people in spaces designed for executives. Please sit. Marcus moved to the chair she indicated but remained poised on its edge. Not relaxing, not settling. His hands rested on his knees, still and controlled. I read your report. Every page, every photograph, every detail you documented. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something in his posture tightened infinitesimally. I documented what I found. The pressure gauges, the falsified logs, I know. And you were right. Bureau Veritas confirmed everything this morning. The fire suppression system has been compromised for at least 6 months. If there had been a fire, we estimate 70% of the sprinklers wouldn't have functioned. You potentially saved hundreds of lives. The words seemed to surprise him more than accusations would have. His eyes narrowed slightly, searching her face for the angle for the manipulation. I was fired this morning. I know. I'm the one who authorized your termination. The bluntness made him blink. Elena watched him process this information, watched the calculations happening behind his eyes. I authorized it because Gerald Vance and Tom Sullivan told me you had filed false reports that you were creating problems to make yourself look valuable. I authorized it because I trusted their judgment over documentation from someone I had never met. Marcus absorbed this without visible reaction, though his hands tightened slightly on his knees. I was wrong. They lied to me. You told the truth, which means I fired the wrong person, so you called me here to apologize. No. I called you here to offer you a job. Silence filled the office, thick with implications. Elena let him think, let him work through the angles and possibilities. What kind of job? Corporate safety director. You would report directly to me with authority to investigate and mandate corrections to any safety issue across all Hartfield properties. Salary $145,000 annually. Full benefits including health coverage for you and your daughter, signing bonus of $20,000 paid up front, regardless of whether you stay past the trial period. Marcus went very still, the kind of stillness that came from shock. Elena had deliberately overwhelmed him with numbers that were probably more than he had made in the last 4 years combined. Why me? I don't have a degree in safety engineering. I don't have certifications. I don't have... You have integrity. You have the ability to see problems others miss. You have courage to report what you find even when it costs you. I can't teach those things. I can't hire them. They either exist in a person or they don't. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. In 8 hours, you identified failures my entire executive team missed or covered up for 6 months. That tells me you're better at this job than anyone I could recruit through normal channels. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk of working for someone who fired you once already. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured, each word chosen deliberately. My daughter is 7 years old. 3 years ago, her mother died and left me with $87,000 in medical debt and a child who needs stability. I've worked 12 jobs in 3 years trying to provide that stability. I can't afford to take a position that sounds perfect and turns out to be temporary. Can't afford to uproot my daughter's life for something that disappears in 6 months because I wasn't actually qualified. The honesty was devastating in its simplicity. Elena had expected negotiation, had expected demands for higher salary or better benefits. Instead, Marcus was telling her that he couldn't afford hope, couldn't risk the emotional damage of another failure. 6-week trial period. You keep the signing bonus regardless of outcome. I'll pair you with a senior VP who can mentor you through corporate protocols. You'll get any certifications you need on company time and company expense. After 6 weeks, if you want to leave, you walk away with my recommendation and $20,000 you didn't have this morning. If you stay, the position becomes permanent. And if I find more problems, if I make people uncomfortable, if I cost you more money fixing things that are broken, then you're doing exactly what I'm hiring you to do. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception. Elena held his gaze, letting him see whatever he needed to see. I have one condition. Name it. Tuesdays off. My daughter has a school presentation in 3 weeks. I promised I'd be there. I need to know I can keep that promise. Elena felt something shift in her chest, something that might have been respect or might have been recognition of what it meant to Marcus that his daughter's trust was worth more than career advancement. Done. What else? If I find problems, if I identify safety issues or code violations or anything else that's wrong, will you fix them even if they're expensive, even if they're embarrassing, even if they make you look bad to the board, especially if they make me look bad to the board? That's the entire point of this position. Marcus was quiet for another 10 seconds. Then something in his expression shifted guard. Lowering slightly, desperation giving way to something that might have been cautious hope. I'll start Monday. Elena extended her hand across the desk. Marcus shook it, his grip firm and calloused. The gesture sealed something that felt larger than an employment contract. Monday, 8 a.m. Veronica will have your paperwork ready and your office prepared. Floor 61, 2 doors down from here. Marcus stood, movement still controlled but less defensive. He made it to the door before turning back. Ms. Hartfield, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really doing this? I made your company look incompetent. I exposed failures in your management structure. I cost you $1 million in repairs. Why promote me instead of burying this and making me disappear? Elena considered the question, considered giving him the strategic answer. But Marcus had been honest with her. He deserved honesty in return. My father cleaned office buildings for 40 years. He told me that honest work was its own reward, that character mattered more than position. I built this company and somehow forgot that lesson. Yesterday, I stood in this office and approved cost-cutting measures without asking where the cuts were happening. I trusted reports without verifying them. She paused, looking past Marcus to the view beyond her windows. You reminded me what integrity looks like when it costs something. I'm not hiring you because you made me look bad. I'm hiring you because you made me look at myself and I didn't like what I saw. That's worth $145,000 a year and then some. Marcus absorbed this expression, unreadable, then nodded once and left without further comment. Elena watched the door close and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Something that might have been hope that she could build a company her father would have been proud of. Veronica appeared 30 seconds later. Your 3 o'clock is here, the architects for the Milwaukee project. Cancel it. Cancel everything this afternoon. I need time to think. Veronica's eyebrows rose slightly. Everything. And Veronica pulled the personnel files for every employee in facilities management. I want to know who knew about the fire system and when they knew it. I want documentation of every meeting where safety was discussed. We're doing a full investigation. We're doing a purge. Anyone who knew about the fire system and stayed silent is gone. Anyone who falsified reports is gone. Anyone who put profit over safety is gone. I don't care how long they've been here or how valuable their institutional knowledge is. Integrity isn't negotiable anymore. Veronica nodded and made notes. Anything else? Pull together a task force. Safety, legal, operations, finance. I want proposals for restructuring our entire safety oversight process. No more quarterly inspections by contractors who have financial incentive to find nothing wrong. I want external audits, anonymous reporting systems, direct lines to executive level for anyone who identifies problems. The afternoon passed in phone calls and emails and strategic decisions that would ripple through the company for months. Elena fired Gerald Vance and Tom Sullivan by 4 p.m., both terminations for cause, both accompanied by legal notices that Hartfield Properties would be cooperating fully with any regulatory investigations. The press got the story by 6 p.m. The Chicago Tribune headline read, Crescent Tower CEO fires executives after whistleblower exposes safety violations. Stock price dropped 8% in after-hours trading, then started recovering as investors processed that quick, decisive action was better than cover-up. By 8 p.m., Elena was alone in her office, city lights spreading below her windows, processing what had happened in the 14 hours since she had opened Marcus Webb's email. She had fired 4 executives committed to spending nearly $2 million in repairs and audits, and hired a security guard with no corporate experience to a senior position. Her phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. Marcus Webb's background check came back with one additional detail. He volunteers every Saturday at a veterans support group helping former military adjust to civilian employment. Thought you should know. Elena stared at the message at this additional data point about a man who worked poverty wage jobs and raised a daughter alone and still found time to help other people. She thought about her father, about his pride in honest work, about his belief that character was what you did when no one was watching. She opened a new email to HR. Effective immediately, all Hartfield Properties employees have access to anonymous safety reporting through external ombudsman. Any employee who reports a safety concern in good faith receives automatic protection from retaliation, including 1-year severance if terminated for any reason within 12 months of report. Make it policy, make it prominent, make it real. Her phone rang. Richard Hayes calling from his home in Winnetka, probably with scotch in hand and disapproval in his voice. Elena, I wanted to call before tomorrow's session. Some board members are concerned about your decision-making today. Some board members, or you specifically, Richard. A pause. Both. You fired 4 executives committed to major expenditures and hired a temp worker to senior leadership. All in one day. All without board consultation. I consulted the board before hiring Marcus. You voted to support it. We voted to not oppose it. That's different from support. Elena sat back down at her desk, too tired for this fight, but recognizing it had to happen now. What would you have preferred, Richard? That I ignore the safety violations, that I cover them up and hope no one got hurt? I would have preferred measured response. Investigation followed by careful action. We understand the full scope. People lied about safety systems. People prioritized bonuses over building codes. There's nothing to investigate. There's only consequences to deliver. Another pause. You're changing the culture of this company very quickly, Elena. That has costs. You can't just burn everything down because one employee filed one report. That one employee saved us from criminal negligence charges and bankruptcy. That one employee did in 8 hours what our entire leadership structure failed to do in 6 months. If our culture can't handle that, then our culture needs to change. You're betting your credibility on this person. If he fails, it won't just damage you, it will damage the company. Elena felt anger rising. I've built this company from 3 employees to 400. I've grown revenue from 1 million to 300 million. I've delivered returns that exceeded projections for 8 consecutive years. I've earned the right to make decisions without having every choice questioned. Richard went quiet. I'm not questioning your track record, Elena. I'm questioning whether you're letting emotion cloud judgment. This Marcus Webb, he's sympathetic. Single father, working class, doing the right thing. I understand the appeal. But sympathy isn't strategy. You think I'm being sentimental. I think you're being human, which is admirable, but not always profitable. Then let me be clear, Richard. I'm not hiring Marcus because I feel sorry for him. I'm hiring him because he has something our executives don't have: the ability to prioritize what's right over what's comfortable. That's not sentiment. That's the most strategic decision I've made in 5 years. Time will tell. Yes, it will. And when it does, when Marcus proves he's worth 10 of the executives I fired today, I'll expect an apology. Richard chuckled, dry and humorless. You won't get one, but you might get my respect. The call ended. Elena set her phone down, processing that her board was fracturing, that her authority was being questioned, that the next few months would determine whether she remained CEO or became a cautionary tale. She thought about Marcus, about his careful question regarding whether she would fix problems even when they were expensive. She had promised she would. Now she had to prove it, not just to him, but to everyone who thought integrity was a luxury successful companies couldn't afford. Elena stood at her windows one last time, looking out at Chicago, at the city where her father had worked invisible jobs and raised a daughter who built towers. Somewhere in those scattered lights, Marcus Webb was probably helping his daughter with homework, doing the 1,000 small tasks that filled the lives of single parents who didn't have the luxury of delegating domestic labor. She wondered if he understood that she needed him more than he needed her, that he represented something she couldn't buy or manufacture, proof that doing right was possible even when it cost everything. Marcus's first Monday began with Emma asking why he was wearing a tie. She stood in the bathroom doorway watching him struggle with the Windsor knot, her expression carrying the kind of amused skepticism that 7-year-olds deployed when parents did something unprecedented and potentially embarrassing. You look weird, Daddy. Thanks, sweetheart. Very helpful. Are you sure you're supposed to wear that? Maybe they want you to wear your normal clothes. Marcus looked at his reflection, at the suit he'd bought Saturday afternoon from a discount store, spending $200 of his signing bonus on clothing that would let him walk into an executive office without immediately identifying himself as someone who didn't belong there. The jacket fit poorly across the shoulders, tailored for men with desk jobs rather than construction backgrounds, but it was dark and professional and would have to suffice. This is what people wear to offices like this one, baby. I need to look the part. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to most observations about adult behavior. But you're not playing a part. You're just being you. The comment landed with more weight than she probably intended, cutting through Marcus's anxiety about corporate protocols to something more fundamental. She was right. He wasn't playing a part. He was Marcus Webb, former Marine, former construction supervisor, current father of one extremely perceptive child. The tie and suit were costumes, but the work underneath would be the same work he'd always done. You're absolutely right. I'm just being me. So why the tie? Because sometimes being you in a place that's new means looking like you understand their rules while you figure out how things actually work. Emma nodded, filing this away for future reference. Okay, but if they're mean to you, you can quit. We'll be okay. Marcus knelt down to her eye-level hands on her shoulders. I'm not going to quit, and they're not going to be mean. This is a good job, Emma, a real one. The kind that means we can stay in this apartment and you can have birthday parties and I can come to your school presentation. Promise, promise? Rosa appeared in the hallway surveying Marcus with the critical eye of someone who had dressed 3 sons for important occasions. The tie is crooked. Come here. She fixed it with practiced efficiency, adjusting the knot until it sat properly centered. When she stepped back, her eyes were wet, though her voice stayed steady. Sarah would be proud of you, Marcus. You know that. I hope so. No hoping. Knowing. That woman believed in doing right even when it cost everything. You're living proof she was right. The words settled into Marcus's chest, warm and painful simultaneously. He kissed Emma goodbye, accepted Rosa's blessing, and walked to the bus stop in October cold that promised winter was coming. The bus ride downtown felt different now that he was traveling to a job rather than from one. Marcus wondered how many of the other passengers were one catastrophe away from losing everything. How many were working multiple jobs to cover rent and food and the basic costs of existing in a city that didn't care if you could afford to live there. Crescent Tower looked different in morning light, less ominous and more merely imposing. Marcus entered through the main lobby this time, not the service entrance, and felt immediately out of place among the executives in expensive suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The elevator to 61 opened onto a corridor that was quieter than the lobby, carpeted in deep blue that absorbed sound, walls decorated with abstract art that Marcus suspected was original. His office was where Veronica had promised 2 doors down from Elena's, with his name already on a placard, Marcus Webb, Corporate Safety Director. The office was larger than his apartment's main room, furnished with desk and chairs and a computer system that looked newer than anything Marcus had used in his life. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made him understand why people worked themselves to exhaustion for positions like this. Veronica appeared at 8:15 with coffee and a tablet filled with information. Welcome to Hartfield Properties. Ms. Hartfield wanted me to give you the orientation personally. The next 2 hours were a crash course in corporate infrastructure, email systems and scheduling software and expense reporting and the dozens of small processes that kept large organizations functioning. Veronica explained everything with patience that suggested she understood Marcus was navigating unfamiliar territory. The senior leadership meeting was scheduled for 11. Are they going to resent me? Veronica's pause told him the answer before she spoke. Some will. You're an outsider who got promoted faster than people who've been here 15 years. But Ms. Hartfield supports you completely, and that matters more than their feelings. The senior leadership meeting took place in a conference room on 63 glass walls offering views in 3 directions. 15 executives were already present when Marcus entered, conversations stopping as they registered his arrival. Elena sat at the head of the table, expression neutral. Everyone, this is Marcus Webb. As I mentioned in Friday's email, Marcus is our new corporate safety director. He'll be leading comprehensive safety audits across all properties. Marcus comes from construction management and military service, which gives him practical experience our previous safety structure lacked. Brad Summers sat halfway down the table, VP of Operations, 50 years old with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from golf courses. His expression was carefully controlled, but Marcus caught the calculation happening behind his eyes. Mr. Webb, welcome. Can I ask about your educational background? I don't see an engineering degree in your file. The question was polite on the surface, poisonous underneath, designed to establish that Marcus didn't have credentials that mattered in corporate environments. Marcus felt 15 pairs of eyes on him. No degree. Marine Corps, followed by 12 years as construction supervisor. I've overseen builds from foundation to finish, managed safety protocols on sites where mistakes meant injuries or deaths, and learned that certifications matter less than attention to detail and willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. Brad smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Of course, though in corporate environments we do value formal training. Safety engineering is complex, I'm aware, which is why I'll be working with certified engineers and leveraging their expertise. But I've also learned that experts sometimes miss obvious problems because they're too focused on technical details. Fresh eyes catch things experienced eyes overlook. The room was silent. Elena leaned forward slightly, something that might have been approval flickering in her gaze. Marcus is exactly right. We hired experts who missed critical failures for 6 months. Marcus found them in 8 hours. That tells me we need different thinking. The rest of the meeting covered operational updates. Marcus absorbed information while noting who spoke and who stayed silent, building a mental map of power structures that would determine how effectively he could implement changes. After the meeting, Elena pulled him aside. How do you feel? Like I'm swimming in deep water without knowing where the sharks are? Brad's a shark. So are 3 others at that table. They've built careers on controlling information flow. You threaten that because you report directly to me. How do I handle them? Do your job. Find problems. Report them to me. Let me handle the politics, and if they try to block me, then they'll discover I'm a bigger shark than any of them. The first week passed in a blur of learning curves and hostile reception. Marcus requested maintenance records from facilities and got responses that took 3 days. He tried to schedule inspections and found calendars mysteriously full. He sent emails requesting information and received replies that were technically responsive but practically useless. By Friday, Marcus had compiled a list of obstruction tactics. He brought it to Elena during their end-of-week review. They're stonewalling me. Every request delayed, every meeting postponed, every document I need somehow lost in bureaucratic limbo. Elena read through his documentation, expression darkening. Who specifically? Brad Summers is coordinating it, but he's got support from at least 4 department heads who see me as threat to their autonomy. Elena picked up her phone speaker on. Veronica, send a company-wide memo from my office. Effective immediately, all requests from Marcus Webb regarding safety audits are priority 1. Any department head who delays or obstructs will be subject to immediate performance review. Make it clear this isn't optional. The memo worked for 36 hours. Then Marcus discovered a different kind of resistance, subtler and harder to combat. His requests were fulfilled, but with data that was technically accurate but practically misleading. Marcus spent his second week learning to read between lines to spot patterns that indicated someone was complying with directives while violating their spirit. He started conducting surprise inspections, showing up at buildings unannounced, catching maintenance crews off guard. On a Thursday afternoon inspection of a Hartfield property on the west side, Marcus found emergency generators that hadn't been tested in 9 months despite regulations requiring monthly verification. The maintenance log showed monthly tests, each entry signed and dated, each result satisfactory. The generator refused to start when Marcus tried it, battery dead, fuel line clogged. He photographed everything and sent the report to Elena with copies to legal and facilities. Within 2 hours, he received an email from Brad Summers requesting an urgent meeting. The meeting took place in Brad's office, 54th floor, decorated with photographs of construction projects and industry awards. Brad sat behind his desk with the relaxed confidence of someone who had survived multiple regime changes. Marcus, I wanted to discuss your inspection methodologies. I'm concerned you're creating an adversarial relationship with our facilities teams. I'm documenting safety violations. If that feels adversarial, maybe the team should consider not violating safety codes. Brad's smile tightened. You're new to corporate culture. Let me explain how things work. We have established relationships with our maintenance contractors built on trust. When you come in making accusations, you damage those relationships. The generators at Westerfield Tower haven't been tested in 9 months. The logs say they have. That's not a relationship problem. That's fraud. That's a harsh word. More likely it's administrative error. 9 consecutive months of identical errors. Brad leaned forward. Let me be direct. You're making enemies, Marcus. People who have been here longer than you, who understand how this company works. You keep pushing like this, you're going to find yourself isolated and ineffective. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who's been in corporate environments long enough to know that being right isn't enough. You need allies. Marcus stood. I appreciate the advice, Brad, but I wasn't hired to make friends. I was hired to find problems. If that makes me unpopular, I'll live with it. Brad's expression went cold. We'll see how long you last with that attitude. Marcus returned to his office and found an email waiting from an address he didn't recognize. Subject line blank. He opened it expecting spam, found instead a PDF of financial records showing Brad Summers had received bonuses totaling $280,000 over the past 2 years. Each bonus tied to cost reduction targets met by cutting maintenance budgets. The email had no sender name, just a brief note. Thought you should see this. Some of us want things to change. Marcus forwarded it to Elena without comment, then sat back and considered what it meant that he had allies in places he couldn't identify. Elena's response came within minutes. Come to my office. She was standing at her windows when he arrived. Where did you get this anonymous email? No sender identification. Elena turned from the window face set in lines that suggested fury held under tight control. It's worse than that. I just pulled the full compensation records. Brad's bonuses aren't just tied to cost reduction. They're specifically calculated based on facilities' budget variance. The more he cuts from maintenance and safety, the larger his personal compensation. That's corruption. He's been incentivized to let buildings decay because fixing them would cost him personally. Elena paced to her desk. I promoted Brad 8 years ago. I trusted him to run operations. I created the bonus structure that incentivized this behavior. This is my failure as much as his. You didn't falsify inspection reports, no. But I created the conditions where doing those things was profitable. I built a system that rewarded the wrong behaviors and didn't check whether people were gaming it. So what do you do now? Fire him, today, and restructure the entire compensation system so no executive's bonus is tied to cutting safety costs. That'll make waves. The board won't like it. The board can accept it or find a new CEO. I'm done letting profit motives override doing what's right. Marcus watched her process the decision, saw the moment calculation gave way to conviction. You're risking your position over this. I'm defending my position. A CEO who tolerates corruption isn't leading. The confrontation happened in the main conference room at 4 p.m. Brad summoned without explanation, Marcus present as witness Diane Fletcher from HR documenting for legal protection. Brad arrived looking confident, not recognizing he had already lost. Elena didn't waste time. Brad, you're terminated for cause effective immediately. Your bonuses for the past 2 years are under investigation. If we determine they were obtained through falsifying reports, we'll be pursuing recovery and potentially criminal charges. Brad's confidence evaporated. You can't do this. I've been here 18 years. I've made this company profitable. You've delivered fraudulent reports and compromised safety to increase your personal compensation. That's not results. That's theft. This is because of him, isn't it? Brad pointed at Marcus. Because some security guard made accusations he can't prove. Marcus spoke for the first time. I can prove everything. The falsified generator logs, the deferred maintenance that coincides with your bonus cycles, the email trails showing you blocked engineers who tried to report problems. You went through my emails, I went through company emails regarding safety issues, your correspondence with contractors discussing how to minimize inspection costs while maintaining appearance of compliance. It's all there, Brad, all time-stamped, all archived. Brad's anger collapsed into fear. Elena, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but firing me, pursuing charges, that's extreme. We will be putting better oversight in place. You won't be here to see it. Security arrived to escort Brad from the building, his 18-year career ending in the time it took to cross the lobby. Marcus watched it happen and felt no satisfaction, just grim recognition that this was necessary. Elena stood at the windows after Brad was gone, silent. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. 3 more will resign by tomorrow. Brad's closest allies. We're going to lose institutional knowledge and have gaps in leadership that'll take months to fill. Better gaps than rot. Yes, but expensive gaps. The board is going to push back hard. Let them push. You're doing the right thing. Elena turned from the window. That's easy for you to say. You've got nothing to lose. I've got a company, shareholders, employees depending on me making smart decisions. Because smart decisions built on corrupt foundations eventually collapse. You either fix the foundation now or wait for everything to fall apart when you can't control the damage. She absorbed this, nodded slowly. Thank you for finding this, for having the courage to pursue it even when people tried to intimidate you. That's the job you hired me for. No, the job is safety director. This is something else. This is integrity that can't be taught or bought. The next 3 days unfolded as Elena predicted. 3 VPs resigned, citing differences in management philosophy. The board called an emergency meeting Thursday afternoon. Marcus wasn't invited but heard the aftermath from Veronica. They wanted to know why she's disrupting operations for one employee's report. Mr. Hayes specifically asked whether you had undue influence over her decision-making. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. What did she say? That you saved the company from bankruptcy, that the disruption was necessary, and that anyone who had a problem with her judgment could vote to remove her? Did they vote 4-3 in her favor? Same margin as when she hired you. Mr. Hayes abstained again. So she's safe, for now, but he's building a coalition. 3 board members who think she's too aggressive. They're watching for her to make a mistake. Marcus processed this, understanding that his presence wasn't just about finding safety violations. If he succeeded, he proved her judgment sound. If he failed, he gave her enemies ammunition. Emma's school presentation was Tuesday of week 3, the date Marcus had marked in permanent marker on his calendar. He left the office at noon despite having 3 meetings scheduled, despite knowing his absence would be noted. The elementary school was 15 blocks from their apartment. A brick building from the 1960s with playground equipment installed before current safety standards and classrooms overcrowded because funding hadn't kept pace with enrollment. 20 parents crowded into a space designed for 30 children. Emma was 7th in the rotation, standing at the front with poster boards showing phases of the moon. My dad helped me with the measurements. He used to build big buildings, so he knows about angles and distances. He says the moon is like a construction project that never ends, always building itself up and tearing itself down and starting over. Marcus felt his throat tighten, pride and love, and the particular pain of knowing his daughter was brilliant, and he could barely afford to give her opportunities that brilliance deserved. After the presentations, the teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled Marcus aside. Emma talks about you constantly, about how you saved people, how you do the right thing even when it's hard. She's so proud of you. I'm just trying to be the man she thinks I am. From what I can see, you already are. He walked Emma home with her hand in his, listening to her chatter about classmates and the hamster they were going to get for the classroom if everyone brought in $3. Can I bring $3? Daddy, Marcus thought about the signing bonus, about the $20,000 that had transformed from abstract number to concrete security. You can bring 5. Get the hamster some extra bedding. Emma's smile was worth every dollar he didn't have 3 weeks ago, worth every risk he'd taken. She hugged him fierce and quick before running ahead, and Marcus followed, thinking that maybe he was building a life Sarah would have been proud of. Thursday of week 4 brought the garage crisis. Marcus was conducting routine inspection of the parking structure beneath Hartfield's main office building when he noticed a crack in support column 47. Not a hairline fracture, but a fissure running 6 feet vertically, concrete spalling away to reveal rebar underneath. Marcus had supervised enough construction to recognize critical failure. This wasn't cosmetic damage. This was structural compromise that could lead to partial collapse. The column supported 3 levels of parking plus the building above. He called Dr. Helen Morris, an independent structural engineer, explained what he'd found. She arrived within 2 hours, spent another 2 examining the column and 7 others showing similar deterioration. Column 47 has lost approximately 40% load capacity. I count 8 other columns with similar damage ranging from 20 to 50%. This isn't sudden failure. This is years of water infiltration and deferred maintenance. How dangerous is it? If you get unlucky with weight distribution, if too many vehicles park in the wrong section, you could see progressive collapse. Conservatively, I'd give it 6 months before failure becomes probable. What's the fix? Structural reinforcement, waterproofing, replacement of compromised sections. You're looking at $4.8 million and 3 months of work. You'll need to close the garage during repairs. Marcus thought about the 1,200 tenants who parked here daily, trusting the building wouldn't collapse. He thought about Elena, about the board that had narrowly supported her. He thought about the political implications of dropping a $5 million problem in her lap right after she'd spent $2 million on fire system repairs. Then he thought about doing the right thing versus the comfortable thing, about Emma asking if he'd seen any ghosts, about the promise he'd made to Sarah that integrity was non-negotiable. Marcus made the call that would either prove Elena trusted him or reveal that corporate loyalty had limits. He didn't call Elena. He called the Chicago Building Department, directly reported the structural hazard, and requested immediate inspection. He sent copies of Dr. Morrison's assessment to the building commissioner, the fire marshal, and OSHA, creating a paper trail that made the problem official before Elena knew it existed. The city engineer arrived next morning, confirmed Dr. Morrison's findings, and issued a notice requiring garage closure within 72 hours. Marcus found out when Veronica called him to Elena's office with a tone that suggested he should prepare for consequences. Elena was standing at her windows when he entered, posture rigid with tension. "You called the city. You reported structural problems directly to building department without informing me first." "Yes." Marcus waited, watching her process this, watching anger war with something else. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "The board meeting is this afternoon. I'm going to have to tell them we're spending another $5 million on repairs you discovered and reported before giving me chance to manage the message." There was nothing to decide. The garage is unsafe. It needs to be closed and repaired. Waiting to massage the message meant keeping it open longer while people parked under compromised structure. That wasn't your call to make. "You work for me, Marcus. You don't get to go over my head whenever you find something." "Yes, I do. That's exactly what I get to do when safety is at stake, and delay means risk." Elena's anger crystallized into something colder. "You forced my hand. You took away my option to manage this strategically. I forced you to do the right thing, because I wasn't sure you would if I gave you time to think about the politics." The accusation landed like a slap. Elena went very still. "You think I would have buried this? You think I would have let people park in an unsafe garage to avoid board pressure? I think you're under enormous pressure to show you can manage costs. I think you might have been tempted to study the problem longer, get second opinions. And while you were studying it, 1,200 people would have kept parking there every day." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications about trust and authority. When Elena spoke again, her voice had shifted. "You manipulated me. You went to the city first so I'd have no choice but to fix it immediately. I protected you from having to choose between doing right and protecting your position. Now the city knows, so you have to fix it, and you can tell the board you had no choice." Elena stared at him, then something unexpected happened. She laughed. Not friendly, but the kind of laughter that came from recognizing you'd been outmaneuvered in a way you had to respect. "You just spent $5 million of my money and forced my hand on a decision I should have been able to make myself. It's the right thing, which means it's both." She sat down, some tension draining. "The board is going to use this to argue I've lost control. Tell them I'm doing exactly what you hired me to do, finding problems, fixing them before people get hurt, And if they vote to fire you, if they make your termination a condition of their support, then you'll have to decide what matters more. Your position or doing what's right. That's not fair. You're asking me to risk everything I've built for one employee. I'm asking you to risk everything for being able to look yourself in the mirror. Money is just a tool. Power is just responsibility. You told me that the first day. Now prove you meant it. Elena looked at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but certain. Get out of my office. I have a board meeting to prepare for. Marcus stood and walked to the door. He had his hand on the handle when Elena spoke again. Marcus, he turned. You're right, about all of it. The manipulation protecting me from political choice, forcing me to do what I should have done without needing to be forced. You're right, and I hate that you're right, and I'm going to support you completely when the board tries to tear you apart this afternoon. I wasn't asking for support, I know. That's why you're getting it. Loyalty that can be bought isn't worth having. But loyalty that tells me hard truths and forces me to be better, that's exactly what I need. The board meeting happened without him 3 hours of closed-door deliberation. Veronica updated him by text. They're voting now. It's close. 20 minutes later, 4-3, she won. You're staying. Marcus went home that evening uncertain whether he'd won or delayed losing. Emma met him at the door with a drawing of their apartment building with home written across the top. Do you like it? Daddy. Marcus knelt down and pulled her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo, feeling the solid weight of her. I love it, sweetheart. It's perfect. Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at art. She says maybe I could be an artist when I grow up. You can be anything you want, baby. Can I be like you? Someone who fixes things that are broken. The question settled into his chest, heavy with implications about legacy and example. You can be exactly like me, Emma. Someone who sees what's wrong and makes it right even when it's hard, even when people tell you not to, even when it costs you something. Emma nodded seriously, filing this away. Then she pulled back and smiled, 7 years old and trusting. I made you something else too. It's in my backpack. She ran to get it, leaving Marcus kneeling in the doorway, surrounded by the accumulated debris of a life rebuilt from ruins. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something that might have been hope, that they were actually going to be okay. Rosa appeared in her doorway across the hall. Everything all right, Marcus? He looked at his neighbor, at their building, at the life he was slowly building from nothing. Yeah, Rosa. For the first time in a long time, I think it is. Emma returned with construction paper folded into a card crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Inside, in careful letters, to Daddy. Thank you for being brave. I love you, Emma. Marcus held his daughter close and let himself believe that integrity still mattered, that doing right still had value, that men who chose character over comfort could still build lives worth living. The card went on his desk at work the next morning, propped against his computer monitor where he could see it every day, a reminder of why the hard choices were worth making.